Welcome back to Reimagining Cyber. I'm your host, Rob Arrego. In today's episode, we're digging into a threat vector that often flies underneath the radar: fraudulent domain registrations and DNS hijacking. These are the building blocks of phishing campaigns, malware distribution, and business email compromise. Yet too many organizations are still playing catch up. Join us as Ihab, a cybersecurity executive and domain security expert with decades of experience in threat intelligence and brand protection. Ihab, glad to have you on. Any additional background information you'd like to share for the audience?
Thank you very much, Rob. I have very deep, extensive experience in tracking, detecting, analyzing, and mitigating fraud online. And that's probably one of the main frontier, along with attack surface management. You will see that bad actors are reaching out to that specific area in order for them to capitalize on a higher ROI for their bad campaigns that they launch against consumers and the like.
Sounds good. And then we're going to dive into it, obviously, in more depth. But, why don't we just kind of start with, as you look at this problem area, in essence, first maybe define for the audience what the problem area really is all about. And then we can kind of get talking into, in essence, why it's been neglected. What are people missing in this area? But just start with setting what's the problem statement that we're dealing with here.
The real problem that we have on the internet today stems from what do bad actors get lured by? Bad actors are lured by generating the highest ROI on their campaign. They want to go after the exposed, easy surfaces for them to either attack or breach. And those attack surfaces are the obvious ones, which are fully neglected by corporations. Number one is your domain name portfolio. A domain name portfolio is not just securing a couple of domain names for a company. A domain name portfolio extends globally. It's point of presence. It's the reputation of the company. It's their online commerce. It's the area by which it attracts users and consumers and builds brand reputation.
Mm-hmm.
Without that, a company is highly exposed. Nobody's going to buy from entities that are either soft in security or have been breached badly or exposed on the internet. And therefore, you have to secure these areas. So first, your domain name portfolio that extends beyond your .com, your .nets, and so forth, meaning a GTLD, global top-level domain name. There are country code top-level domain names that you should secure that portfolio. And the portfolio must be online and defensive registration so that you have to have a strategy behind that. If you want to operate online today, you must do that. This is non-negotiable in order for you to have a proper security posture. The second area is DNS. DNS is exposed. You cannot secure DNS by saying, well, I'm not going to share a query. It doesn't work that way. So your DNS footprint is also exposed. The combination of domain names and DNS, if they are that exposed, whether on the cloud or on-prem, it creates the start of a vulnerability for bad actors to start attacking that particular company. And as you know, last but not least, how do you attack today a soft target? Well, first you do your recon, then you apply a few tools, gather information, start looking in social media. That recon process is what's called a targeted attack. They know the victim. They know who are the consumers of the victim. So that particular study that bad actors conduct today is highly essential for them because it's a business and they have to maximize that ROI on their campaign that they have launched against the corporation.
So in essence, we're talking about brand protection, right? Which at times you can't even put a dollar amount on for organizations.
Exactly.
The aspect of there's all sorts of different types of cyber-related security incidents and breaches that occur. This is one that you want to shine the light on, which is really, in essence, domain hijacking at the end of the day, that people just kind of take for granted at times. So as you're talking about their registrations, their DNS registrations, they're not considering the right protection schemes around them. And so obviously the attacker it's prime for the pickings, if you will. It's part of their recon. They go through, they understand, they assess. and they're going to come and attack it. Let's stitch it together. How would you kind of work through elements as it relates to what an organization should be doing to properly protect, right, their reputation, which is, again, there's really can't put a dollar amount, as I mentioned earlier, on that.
You got to have a strategy. First, you begin with what are the domain names that you own legally by multiple entities within your organization. It cannot be owned by just marketing or the legal team or owned by IT. That's a segregated portfolio waiting to happen. The whole concept of shadow IT, which is today shadow AI, is the same concept, is by which that there's no centralization or gatekeeper of the actual portfolio. Having a segregated portfolio means the marketing department could launch a brand new campaign legitimately and on a legitimate domain name. And then when they finished their campaign on that particular, say, product, they delete the contents on that website thinking that it's done. Well, in reality, it's not done. The zone files still include a DNS record. Well, some crafty bad actor or a group of bad actors who monitor that company will realize that this is an abandoned domain name, and all they need is a few steps of trickery under social engineering for them to gain access over that particular domain name. And now, if they own that domain name, and by the way, this is not a hard problem. This is one of the most recent problems with subdomain name hijacking. You just reclaim that domain and do whatever you want to do with it. And no one would see you because you're already legitimate in the DNS zone and no one is monitoring. So the standard monitoring tools that we have in the EDRs and the XDRs and the advanced SIEMs, and this is not going to detect it whatsoever. It's going to go underneath the radar because it's legitimate traffic.
Yeah.
Because there's no governance. So that's on the domain side. And then you can ask on the DNS side, ask any big company, when was the last time you've done a DNS cleanup or zone file cleanup? 99 out of 100, they will tell you, don't remember when, but I'm not the one to go clean it up today because I could break some legacy equipment. And that audit right there is a serious problem. So how could you be in the business of security and you're afraid to touch a record? What about zero trust concept? And you have to monitor your email gateway. You can't rely on email gateways to protect your enterprise from malware. Think about it. The email gateways or the vendors who are behind email goods are doing a fabulous job. But how long have they been doing this real job that they are after? They've been doing it since the 90s to combat spam. And then it mushroomed into other kind of threats, and then to phishing, and now to malware distribution. And guess what? The same vendors, we're trusting the same vendors who cannot solve the spam problem till this day. Not critiquing them, but we are shining the light on a problem. The question is, why they haven't solved the spam problem since the 1990s? A lot of analysts in Wall Street predicted that spam will disappear in 2000, 2002. We're still living with 90% of your inbox is spam. Why is that? The real problem, which we are shining the light on, is that we do have inherited problems in the protocol that govern the internet. The protocols that govern the internet are TCP/IP, bind for DNS protocol, and the like. When you have these protocols that everybody is afraid to touch, to work on seriously and solve the problem, you're going to end up with the same problem because the carrier of the disease is the same protocol. What carries spam? Guess what? Email. IPv4 all the way. We see spoofed email headers till this day. Why is that? Because you can easily do it. Look at phishing, how it evolved. It evolved with a campaign to send 5 million emails. Hopefully you can get 1%, 2% hit on your campaign. Whereas today it's so targeted and they know who to target and how to social engineer that company quite well because the attacks moved from broadcast to targeted. So we have a problem.
So now there's another thing you mentioned that I want to kind of drill into a little bit further is it sounds like there's some form of connection that you're also seeing that drives higher risks relative to the social media aspect as well. So kind of, talk a little bit about that. What's that other connection point that social media brings in? I'm assuming it's going to tie back into the brand at the end of the day, but go ahead.
So true. It's so true. It is so interconnected now. It's not funny. Think about it this way. A multi-trillion-dollar company today, they don't manage their domain names. Go look at the big boys. They don't manage them. They outsource that management to what's called a corporate registrar, a security conscious registrar. And that's a must. You want me to call you a secure company and call without domain security, your security posture is incomplete, have a partner, a secured corporate registrar who cares about security, meaning apply SOC 2, ISO 27001 and 2 protocol, applies zero trust security posture, has training program for social engineering, and they spend on their future. That's a registrar I want to be with. Also, lock your domain names. If you have a vital domain name, xyz.com, and that's your e-commerce site, don't make it easy for somebody to change the ownership. Therefore, you have to have what's called multi-lock. You have to monitor it. You can't monitor it through your EDR. EDR is the breach point. So you want to monitor through a layered approach defense mechanism. So where's social media coming in? Now I'm going to tie the dots for you. Well, it's another avenue by which you can disseminate bad URLs, fraud. You are disseminating something if you are a bad actor. Who's monitoring your reputation over there? Reputation is not, oh, I just care about no one saying bad things about me. That's called brand abuse. What about unauthorized reseller? You sell a certain type of product, and there's an entity who's selling your product, but at a discounted rate. It's not counterfeit product, but they're unauthorized. How do you manage that channel? What if the unauthorized reseller is abusing their security posture, and now they get hacked? Guess what? Your consumers fell into a trap.
So I want to come back a little bit on one of the things that you were talking about, and something clicked for me, and I want to kind of connect the analogy and get your perspective if this is relative. You talked about domain name locking, which I want to get a little bit more detail. And when you said that, it made me think, well, geez, it sounds like basically freezing your credit. Is that a similar analogy which you kind of tie it to, or is it different?
Wow, you're on point. Yes. I mean, think about it. We today have a credit score of our, ability to borrow money, right?
Right.
And everybody wants to improve it, methods, etc. The same apply with today. There are several companies give you a score on your security posture. You're 89.
Right.
89 means whatever. But the reality, 89 or 100 or 99, these are numbers, with all due respect, based on criteria that was established by a person or a few people, and then they give you an actual score. That doesn't mean you are not a very smart person who figured out how to raise their score higher in order for them to borrow more money. There are tactics. That doesn't mean they're not high risk. The same apply with cybersecurity. When somebody gives you a score, what does that mean? It's a number in that's what we call the security posture. We think you're good, but the fundamentals remain the same. Even if you get 95% and you have a bad vulnerability, guess what? You're breached. That's it. They're going to capitalize on. All it takes is one breach. In other words, if you don't have the right programs to today operate properly online, you are going to face a real problem, specifically with the emergence of these platforms. There's fraud GPT, ghost GPT, malware GPT, bad GPT. There's host GPT, bulletproof web hosting, and name it. Today is available. You can rent it at as low as $50 to $300. You're set.
You can spend the most money, protect your environment as best as possible as you think, and there's still going to be something that's going to occur. Period, hands down. Right. Correct. Now, kind of wrapping things up. Here's what I'd love to hear from you. Just kind of, few bullet points as to for the audience to understand. I heard Ihab today talk about, in essence, DNS hijacking. People aren't really paying attention to it. There's a bunch of different things that it impacts, brand protection being a major part of that, right? The social media connection point comes back to tell you and validate the story. what are kind of the key takeaways that you would share as the best approaches they should consider for their own organizations around helping prevent these types of attacks?
A CISO today must control their domain name portfolio. That's a must. The CISO must have that full jurisdiction on that domain name portfolio. The domain name portfolio can be segregated with an authoritative figure on top of it, and that's the CISO or the chief risk officer who works with the CISO very closely, and that normally the chief counsel of the company. So now we defined who owns the actual problem. Now you need a partner. You must have a partner in the corporate world, not the retail world. The retail world, they'll put you with all the amateurs. You want someone who will carve an area for you, and that's your domain of operation. Number 3, you've got to multi-lock what we classify the most essential or vital domain names. Those domain names by which you operate online. These are the active domain names. Then you must have a defensive methodology by which, if you say, let's say your company's name is rob.com, you have to have the normal protections by saying Rob's with an added S, I also want to own it.
Yeah.
That's a defensive method. Now, can you do it for everything? The answer is no, but don't leave the low-hanging fruit out there. You can never defend against everything, but defend against what's the obvious. Monitor your domain name registrations. There are newly domains that get registered on a daily basis. Some are dropped. Some are re-registered. Do not wait till somebody breaches you.
Yeah, well said. I think one of the things I'll emphasize is the aspect, and I say this all the time, of continuous, right? So it's continuous assessment, monitoring, and in your example today of the main kind of focus area, on the domain names that you have invested in to drive your business, right? In many cases, and not take it for granted. Put some good boundaries around your program that include an ongoing, again, review of what those domains are. How are you reused throughout the organization, and know that, again, they're properly protected effectively through your proper registrar. And I think that's a really key point that we were, really talking about as Ihab, you wanted to come on and share with us today. So really appreciate having you on, shining a light on a topic that I think definitely does fly underneath the radar, as I opened up and talking about. And I think, it'll get people thinking a little bit differently. And honestly, at the end of the day, this all goes back to good cybersecurity hygiene. And it's kind of one of those things that you kind of go through the checklist and you're like, wait, this wasn't even on the checklist. Let's add it on there. So thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate you sharing that with us.
No, thank you for your time. I really appreciate that, Rob. You're one of the few who is shining the light on one of the most important missing pillars in any corporate cybersecurity posture. Without domain security, we believe that security posture is incomplete.
Hello, producer Ben here, and thanks for listening to Reimagining Cyber. I do hope you enjoy the show, which, incidentally, is number 161 in our canon of episodes, which means that if you're a new listener, you are lucky enough to have 160 other editions of Reimagining Cyber just waiting to be downloaded and devoured. Is it the best way to spend your well-earned summer vacation? Maybe yes. Maybe not, but I'm saying that you shouldn't rule it out either way. And if you're listening to this in the Southern Hemisphere, I realise that you're deep into winter right now, so what better way to clear out those dull day blues than by leaving us a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. It gives us a bit of a lift, and it helps other cybersecurity-minded types find the show. We'll be back next Wednesday. Goodbye.